Hello, everybody. So this is Harry from Purple Jam. Next week we'll be doing a demonstration of the new combat mechanic we've been talking about a little bit, but it's not quite ready to do a run through as of yet. Although it is coming on, it's rather exciting. Instead, I thought I'd do a little bit of a talk about sort of how we approach game design. And I suppose just an interesting philosophy behind creating games. And it's not something that's necessarily like apparent in the day-to-day act of making a game, but it's more an overall approach or ideology, I suppose. Now, there are people like Jonathan Blow, for instance, who have said this in far more succinct a way than I will. But I think it's very interesting, nevertheless. So, if you imagine you have a filled water balloon in your hands and you can feel the shape of it, when you press in or apply force on one part of that water balloon, the rest of the balloon contorts to change shape in reaction to you pressing down on one side of it. Everything within that sort of closed system of the water balloon is integrated. You can't move one molecule of water, H2O, inside the water balloon without it affecting a molecule of water on the other side. It's adaptable, it's not rigid, it will always respond in a way that is consistent internally, because it's based on fundamental rules of what happens within the closed system of the water balloon, right? You can design a game in this way, or more, you can design a system in this way. And I suppose that's what a system is. It's a combination of rules. And when you apply different forces to various parameters within that system, the rules given consistently how they interact. If you imagine an equation, or more the answer of an equation, you can't change the value, and think of the equation like the state of the game, or the answer like the state of the game. You can't change one of the parameters in the equation without changing the state of the game. And the way in which those parameters interact are always consistent in the equation. So when designing a game in this way, what you have, a set of parameters and how they interact, and then you explore those interactions. You play around within a build and find what's interesting and fun based on the system you've developed, and then you create the levels of the game around that. Obviously, this is applicable to physics-based puzzle games or simulation first-person shooters with completely destructible environments, or games like Half-Life 2. And what this gives you is internal consistency, which is vitally important when you're making something that needs to feel fair, or needs to feel like when the user does something, it can have consistent effects. When the user interacts in a certain way, they can predict what the outcome will be, and therefore they can logically reason about what the best course of action might be next. Now, I really like this ideology or philosophy. It's how it means that humans can learn a game system in the same way that they learn how to do things in real life, because there are the laws of physics, and you learn to interact with the world based on those laws of physics. to make this more real as regards how we're actually going to apply this idea going forward, the most obvious sort of way in which we're applying this ideology is using binaural audio. Things in real life sound like they can be 3D, or real life sounds 3D. You don't just have left, right, you have up and down, front, back. And so we obviously use that in all of our games. Secondly, using occlusion, appropriate audio occlusion, is another example of this. Is there the thing in the way of the audio source? You can tell that because it's occluded, both in volume and the frequencies that make it through the occluding object. What's most exciting to me at the moment is trying to apply this to how we're designing the new combat mechanic going forward. Fighting in games needs to feel fair. It's like any game. If you fail, it needs to be. You need to feel like it was your own fault, and that there was something you could do to have done better and become more skillful. If something one hit kills you and you didn't see it coming, that's just frustrating, right? But if you get hit by an enemy's fast attack, which follows a certain pattern, and you just forgot to block at the right moment, that's frustrating, but it's fair, and you know what to do next time. You can develop skill and mastery, and that's part of what makes games cool. So something we're really thinking about is making the timing of the parry system and then attack system in game, and also the angle with which you need to face the enemy in order to parry or to attack, consistent across all enemies. And then the speed with which they attack will change, and so the time you'll have in which to parry will change, and their recovery time will change as well, because those are parameters on the left-hand side of the equation. We can adjust to make it more difficult. Another application of this is maintaining control scheme. So for example, if in the main game you use you either go left or right on the joystick, or you use the left and right arrow keys to turn around, that should be true in fighting as well. If you use space to perform an action like focus, space should be the important key in fighting as well when you're not going to focus. If you can move around using forwards and backwards in a free roaming type way in the main game, you shouldn't then be locked in space in a particular position in fighting. So what we're doing here is essentially trying to do the lightest possible change to the control scheme to work as a fighting mechanic, so that we don't have to do any, sort of clunky tutorials or just exposition of the controls. Whereas we only really need to do that for when you initially start the game and you start moving around. Everything other than that should be obvious, based on what comes naturally to the player when they're trying to interact with the game. And there's a really good word for that I've just forgotten. So if someone could tell me in the comments, that would be great. Cool, bit of a rambly one. I seem to do rambly ones. But I hope that was fairly interesting. I'll probably talk about it a little bit more when I do the combat mechanic video and explain how I've applied this ideology to the design of that, and also, give you an example of the actual gameplay. But yeah, hope you're all staying safe and wearing masks and having a lovely time despite the state of the world, which is pretty mental. Yeah, bye.